In this lesson, we're going to cover the rules of sparring. And obviously the rules vary from one school to another. There are common rule sets that are used among most Taekwondo schools. There are rules that are used for Olympic sparring in Taekwondo. And then, of course, every martial arts school is free to do their own thing and make their own modifications to the rules as they see fit. Our rules change depending on the level that you are at for your belt level. So the school that I trained at originally was Chung Oh's school, and at that school the rules that they had for sparring were that you're not allowed to kick below the belt. So anything below the belt is off limits. You cannot kick or punch below the belt. So no low blows, no leg attacks, that's all off the table. Valid target areas would be the front, like the stomach here. This would be a valid target area. You're allowed to kick the sides of the torso. That's a valid target area. But you were not allowed to kick to the back or punch to the back. Whenever I say kick or punch, just attack. You weren't allowed to attack to a person's back. You could only hit front or sides of the torso, and everything had to be above the belt level. Now, when it came to the head, you were allowed to attack all the way around 360 degrees when it came to the head. But typically, it was either no contact that was allowed, or at most, light contact, typically. There was some full contact sparring as well, but only in a limited capacity at Chung Oh's school. Most people simply were not interested in the full contact sparring because that's when you get the most severe injuries if you're doing stuff like that. So the basic rules of sparring at Chung Oh's school were everything above the belt was fair game, and you were allowed to make, typically you were allowed to make light contact when you were hitting the body, but at head level it was typically no contact. But you were allowed to, the idea was to come close. So if you could come within 2 inches of your opponent's head, and they didn't have an arm or a hand in the way to block that technique, if you could show that your technique got through and you stopped your technique right there, right next to the person's head, that was regarded as a point. That was considered a hit. You showed that you could get through and strike the opponent had you wanted to. So demonstrating control is very, very important with sparring. So at this level, since you're a new student, at this level I have kept those basic rules from Chung Oh's school, which you find in many other Taekwondo schools. I've kept those the same for my school at this level. And so that means all attacks have to be above the belt. You are allowed to perform any kick as long as it is above belt level. That is the idea. And to the body, again, we prefer to see no contact at this level because you don't yet have the control over your techniques to be able to gauge exactly where something is going and where it's going to stop. So that's very important. As you go up in level, you get finer and finer control over your techniques. When you're first starting out, you have very little control over your techniques. And we don't want to see injuries happening at the club. So for this level, we want to see no contact. So that means coming close. And we understand that contact is still going to happen sometimes. It's going to happen accidentally, and it's not a big deal. But we want to go for close, but no contact at this level. So any kick, whether you want to do front kick, whether you want to do side kick, roundhouse kick, those are all valid techniques as long as they are belt level or higher. So you can go to the torso you can attack to the sides here, and you can go head and neck level. And when it comes to the head, you can attack all the way around at head level. So anything close that gets to the target without being intercepted by a block, that is regarded as a point. So if you're sparring in a tournament, the judges will call points on those techniques. So there's also some confusion about point sparring versus continuous sparring, and I wanted to clear that up as well. Most of the sparring that we're going to be doing, especially at the lower belt levels, is going to be what's called point sparring. And in point sparring, as soon as you make a point, as soon as you score a point on your opponent, the judges will yell point and the action will stop. And what happens then is the two fighters will be separated. You'll go back to your starting lines, and you'll see this, I'm gonna cover this more in depth in other videos here. This is just an introduction to sparring. But there will be a ring, which is usually a square, okay? It's a defined area where you spar within, and there will be a starting line for both fighters. One side is typically blue, and the other side is typically red. Whenever a point is scored, the judges will call point. They'll make a hand signal with that. They'll call point. The fighters will be separated, and they will indicate who scored the point, whether it was red or whether it was blue, and how many points were scored. Because some techniques are worth more points than others, or certain target areas might be worth more points than others. At Chung Oh's school, for example, an attack to the head was regarded as 2 points. An attack to the body was regarded as 1 point. So, and it should also be mentioned at this point that punching to the face was not allowed. And I'm going to keep the same rule for the lower belt levels at my school, and that is no punching to the face. So the way the fists are, they do more damage and they cut. They leave more hideous injuries, believe it or not, than if you get kicked in the face. So it's just the nature of the human body that getting kicked in the face, even though it does damage, it doesn't cut and leave, really hideous scarring and other marks as easily as with the knuckles and the fist. So punching to the face is off limits. When it comes to punching, the only punch that you are allowed at this level is middle punch. So it has to be a straight in punch, and it has to be a middle punch. So you're not allowed to go to the face, you're not allowed to go low, below the belt, and you're not allowed to do hooks or uppercuts. Again, at this belt level, just middle punch is the only hand technique that you're allowed. No back fisting, no knife hands, just middle punch. And getting back to sparring. So I mentioned point sparring. Continuous sparring is when the fighters are not separated after a point is scored. So the judges might still be scoring points in their head of who's doing better in the fight, but the fighters are not separated. So you kick and you land a shot, you can keep coming and keep attacking your opponent indefinitely. So you can attack until either, for example, a knockout was scored. Again, this is at the higher belt levels if full contact is allowed. A knockout might stop the fight. You can go till you run out of time and the match has ended. You could go until an opponent, for example, resigns. So if somebody's getting pummeled, their corner might throw in the towel, or the person might just walk off, and say that they've had enough. That's it. They resign. So you can go and continuously, you don't get separated in between until time expires or the fight ends for one of those other reasons. And at the conclusion of the fight, then the judges, if they're keeping score, they would hand in their scorecards and you could find out who won, or it could just be a simple, red one or blue one, as simple as that, and they give their score that way. But that is with continuous sparring, and that is, again, more towards the higher belt levels than the lower belt levels. Where you are right now, for introduction, basic sparring, everything above the belt, and only middle punch is allowed, any kick is allowed, but we want to see no contact at this level. So when it comes to protective equipment, I've got some other videos showing some of the protective equipment. I'll probably do a few more on those coming up as well. But what we allow is the arm guards, we allow the shin guards, but we don't have gloves, so we're not wearing gloves. The chest protectors are optional. You can wear a chest protector if you like, and the headgear is also optional. So you can wear headgear if you want, but it's not required. Because again, at this level, everything should be no contact. So those are the basic rules for sparring at this level and for my school. And like I said, much of it has been adopted from the way it was done at Chung Oh's school. There are no changes to the basic sparring rules at this level. So, till the next lesson.